So today, we wanted to introduce SUP, the new CLI tool that's going to let you to do all sorts of fun things with Superset using a brand new CLI, and we're going to tell you all about it and do some demos. Uh, Max, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll do a quick intro. So I'm Max. I started Apache Superset a while ago, and I started preset.io about 6, 7 years ago at this point. Just like huge open source advocate, builder, love to build data tools. So that's kind of my thing. So I'm right in my zone right here.
Yep, and I'm Evan. I also work at Preset and have been for almost 7 years and working on Superset as a committer PMC member. And you probably know me if you're on Slack or attend these things regularly. So what we're going to cover today is what SUP actually is, since it's probably new to most of you. We're going to go into the kind of core features and use cases, and we're going to talk about its use case as real world examples and show some of the differentiators compared to other tools we have available to Superset users and developers. And we're going to demo. We thought about doing a demo that's, kind of post slides, just go into it, but I think we're going to do a little experiment here and try to demo as we go along through the slides. So I'll be switching tabs a lot.
I wanted to mention real quick. So we had before a preset CLI or something. We had a repo called backend SDK, which shipped a preset CLI, a superset CLI. It worked well. It could do a lot of the things that we're going to show in sub today from a backend standpoint, but this new CLI is so much more usable. The command architecture, the sub commands are a lot more natural. And then we threw in a lot of colors and goodies. So now we have like rich data tables. So you'll see that in action in just a moment.
Yep. So what is SUP? That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, it's your new CLI and the best tool for headless BI, we think. It does all these things that you see in the key capabilities list, which I will not read to you, but we're going to be going through them one by one. It allows you to do all sorts of SQL and superset operations that you can automate and or just, do by hand in the CLI and will speed up a lot of things you do if you're managing superset instances and want to explore your data in new ways. So first, we need to talk about what is headless BI. It's a way to use Superset as a data access layer and explore, retrieve, create, migrate assets, and do all these things in a very scriptable way. You can manage all of your charts and dashboards and queries and other assets as code. So you can integrate with GitHub and various other workflows to, speed things up, not using the UI essentially. And all of the bits under the hood that Superset gives you in terms of access controls and governance are still relevant when you're using this CLI layer. So it's safe and scalable and does all kinds of fun stuff. Um, and the problem we're trying to address here is that there's a bit of an automation gap with any BI tool, really, but Superset included that the UI is great for doing all the things you want to do when you're viewing data sets and you want to build visualizations and see stuff in real time. But if you want to actually manage all of those assets and do scripts with CI or use LLM agentic tools, things like that, then a better CLI is really going to add capabilities and reliability here. So you can, like it says, interact with your BI layer very programmatically.
One thing that's really clear in terms of like where this can help is managing multiple environments, right? So these BI assets, they're highly visual. You typically need a UI to create them in the first place, right? When you think about the options, do you want to show the legend? Do you want to put it on top, on the left? So there's all these controls. So it's not always convenient to say create charts as code. But if you want to manage these charts as code, right, especially in an area where you have multiple superset environments, like it's super easy to do on preset. Most of our customers have a, dev staging prod type setup. They might have different teams with different assets. So when you want to move these assets or replicate these assets or templatize these assets and change them slightly from one place to the other, that's where this really, really shines.
Yep. So comparing it to the regular CLI, many of you are aware that there's already a Superset CLI that's available, and there's a preset CLI that layers on capability on top of that for preset users. Um, but really, this is kind of a whole new set of tools that stacks on top of that. So you can do stuff more simply, and as you'll see when we start demoing, it kind of helps you along. So rather than using the CLI that it's kind of like an abstraction of the API, this provides a simpler way to explore.
Talking a little bit about, if you go and pip install Apache Superset, you get a CLI, right, with it. And that CLI is really the administrator CLI. It's not meant really for users. So it will allow you to start the web server and I forget what all is in the Superset CLI that ships with it, but it's also not going over REST, right? So it's not like necessarily a proper CLI. It's something that's directly part of the core of Superset, where this CLI we're going to show today, it's much more of a user-based CLI. It interacts properly over REST, so you have to authenticate. Um, and then it can expose the bulk of the REST API through a command line interface.
Yep, and we can address two questions that have cropped up in the chat. Are preset CLI and superset CLI the same? Not quite. The superset CLI does a lot of stuff for open source superset instances, where the preset CLI does all of that and more, layering on capabilities that are preset specific to manage multiple workspaces and which are instances of superset, and allows you to very easily migrate your open source superset onto preset, or you can migrate assets from preset to superset instances. But SUP is actually a third door and a whole new option.
So we should talk about can you use the SUP that we're going to demo today? Can you use it with Superset? The answer is yes, most likely, probably, but it depends on your auth configuration. So you might have to. We don't know how people do auth in the wild necessarily with Superset. You might use Okta, you might use this or that. So as long as you can figure out the auth part, the bulk of the commands in the CLI should just work. And there's some areas where you can manage your workspaces. You'll see in the demo that you can. There's all this notion of like selecting a workspace that is preset specific.
Yep. And two questions people are asking. Well, there's two people asking the same question of, are we still supporting the preset CLI? Are things backwards compatible? Is anything going to break for me? The answer is nope. It's preset CLI still works. This is an additional tool. So you can use both all as well. Nothing to fear here.
Yeah, we're looking to phase them out, right?
Mhm.
Ships
Oh,
same architecture, but over time we're going to move. We're going to try to push people to so we can deprecate the old stuff and just offer a lot more on
yeah.
on SUP.
But that's not happening today. This is a new tool. You will be notified of any deprecations if you're a CLI user and doing automations using preset CLI. You'll be okay. All right. So the key capability here that's new is that it's an agent-friendly design. So as Max is going to demo as we move along, the AI tools work really well with this. And um, so yeah, you can do all sorts of fun stuff. You get all sorts of fun output formats, and you'll see all this in action. But it's great for agentic use. So
All
some,
right, should we pivot into active mode or a
yeah,
few more
let's go
things to
for it.
say? All right, so now we're getting that effect. All
Aha.
right, do you see what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Okay, you let me know if that's not the case or if things changes. So I have an environment here that's something that we've been working on at Preset Labs. So that's called Agor. If there's more time, I can demo it a little bit. But this tool you can think of as a place where you can manage a lot of agentic sessions. So maybe I'll do a tiny bit of a tour. I'm gonna have to reset the CLI after. But this is a board-based type setup. So think of it like Figma. And here, all of these are Git branches on a given project. And all of these are agentic sessions. So we have some Cloud Code sessions, some Codex session I'm going to get into later. So I can show you the agent or the agentic tool, in this case, using our CLI. But this is very much a place to do development environment. If you want to check it out, I think I have the link ready here. So you can check it out at agor.live. So out of preset lab, also open source, but that is not the demo today. We're going to stay focused.
We'll do another
And
webinar, promise.
yeah, we'll do another webinar. Before I get started, so here, we can put some markdown on those boards. So you see the welcome of the CLI, and I'm going to zoom into this, which is a bit of a mind map of the stuff that's inside the CLI before we hit it in the demo. But so the CLI has got a config manager. So it's able to remember what is your active workspace ID if you're working with multiple workspaces. It can remember your database connection ID. So you can run SQL without having to type dash dash database ID is equal to this. It allows you to manage all of your resources. So inside of here, for things like dashboard, here it cut out, but dashboard, charts, queries, workspaces, most of the core assets in Superset, you'll see that you can do things like list and info and push and pull, use and show. And then there's a little bit more here we're going to get into in the demo of this sync. So it allows you to synchronize asset across multiple workspaces. All right, so now we're going to hop into a proper terminal session. Well, I said proper terminal session. Actually, it is not really proper. It's a web-based terminal, but it's essentially the same. I got to activate here because I'm in a dev environment. I'm going to move to my folder where I'm going to run the demo. So here I should just be able to write sup. And what you're going to see is just a nice little welcome page. So the CLI is very self-documenting. We do have I don't have the link handy. We should put a link on this main page, but we have a doc website. Evan, if you want to put the
Yeah, I'll
link.
do a slide for that, and we'll share it.
Sweet. So now I'm going to do the first thing you do when you enter a new CLI, and the first thing your agents are going to do if you're in Cloud Code or Codex, run sup dash dash help. So here you get high level of what's happening inside the CLI. So something that's pretty sweet is it auto completes. So you can install your completion. Here, I believe I need to bash it up if I want for this to work. So now I should be able to write sup workspace and tab complete, right? So that's tab completion built in. You can show the completion. There's this little helper. If am I on the latest version, you can run dash dash version. The first thing I'm going to do is show you the config system. So the config system is as simple as sup config, hit enter. And then you can see kind of what's in there. I'm going to run sup config show. That's going to show you my current configuration. So you can see it's a stateful CLI. So that means it remembers some things. And you can set or reset or change some of these settings. So here you can see I'm authed. I'm connected to a specific workspace ID that looks cryptic, but it's pretty easy to figure out what that workspace is. There's a target workspace ID. So if I'm going to run like push and pull, the push might not be the same workspace as the one as I'm pulling from, right? So you could set when I push, I want it to go to this workspace. There's database ID. So I see that I don't have one set up. So I'm going to have to set one up. The assets folder is if you're working with an asset folder, this is where your assets are going to go when you pull. There's the output format of the table. You can kind of there's a new feature around monochrome, so the agent's going to trip up over themselves if you put a lot of color tag it. They come in as code. So in agentic mode, you can tell your agent to go monochrome if they prefer that. So the next thing I'm going to do is sup config auth. I'm just going to show you how this works, and I'm not going to do this, but here, if you say that you want to log in, it's going to give you a URL to the exact right place in preset where you can get your API key. And you're just going to copy paste your API key so the workflow is pretty smooth. Once you do this, then you're going to know that you're connected. I'm having a spam phone call now. All right, so what I do have here, a bit of a scripted demo. I want to stay on track, so you might see me tab switch to figure out where to go next. All right, so I just have to stop my phone. Got distracted a little. So this is the commands that I was planning on using for today. So I might go back and forth a little bit. So sup workspace list. or maybe I'll just for orientation, I'm going to write sup help. So you can see that we have this SQL command. So this we're going to spend more time on a little bit later, but you can use the Superset backend as a data access layer. So that means that you can really, really easily run SQL here on any of your database connection, and it goes through Superset. So we'll use the same auth term, logging, policies that you might have in place inside Superset is going to happen here. Next thing I'm going to do is sup workspace list. So this is going to list all my workspaces. So I'm a little bit abnormal here because I do have a lot. And because it's a CLI, you can do things like grep, right? So I'm going to grep for, I know the workspace I want to use today is called sup demo. This should simply just filter. The workspace I want to use is this one. So I'm going to say sup workspace, and I should be able to autocomplete, use in this specific one. So now I'm set to use this workspace as a backend for all the commands that I'm going to use. What I was going to show you next is if I say sup config show now, you see that my workspace ID is set. Next, maybe I can show you sup chart, and we're going to do the help so you can see for the chart accessibility, the commands that I have. So I do have sup chart list, sup chart info to get an info on a specific chart. I can get the SQL that's behind a chart, or I can get the data that's behind a chart, and I can pull and push some charts. So now I'm going to say sup chart list. Maybe we'll do a limit 10 so that we don't get too many. So I get a super rich table here, and I don't know if you knew, but you can represent links inside terminals nowadays. So these are actual hyperlinks. So if we're interested to look at this specific chart over here, I did a command click. We're loading the chart directly. If I do the same command click on the ID itself, that will take me to the exact spot where the chart definition is stored as JSON. So kind of gibberish, but it could be useful if you want to integrate in some way. You can very easily find the JSON that's behind a chart. Now for the list command, that's also another rich command that has a lot of options. So if I want to look at the list of only the charts that are mine or on a specific dashboard ID or on a data set, it's super easy to apply whatever filter you might want to apply. So here I'm going to look at just my chart. I think I'm the admin user, so I'm like all the charts are mine here, but you can do some ordering. There's very much a lot of things you can do. So I'm going to go back to my limit 10. And what I want to do is show the different formats. So here for most of the commands, you can do things like dash YAML. Maybe, whoops, I put it in the wrong spot. So there's going to be some typing mistakes here, despite the autocomplete. So here I'm getting my listed chart, but as a big YAML blob, right? So, so if you want to extract a bunch of YAML, or if you wanted to look at it, in a JSON format, you can do this. For agents, something that can be interesting is this idea of porcelain. So porcelain is, I believe like some of the Git and GitHub CLI use this nomenclature. So porcelain just gives like a very clean, direct output. So here in CSV, no colors. So agents will, you might want to instruct your agent, or your agent might discover that there's a dash porcelain, so it doesn't get all the color codes and some of the nonsense that might show up otherwise. So maybe just showing a little bit more. So I'll go back into my limit 10. So listing my charts. So what I wanted to show is this idea of info. So if I want the info on chart 75, I can certainly do that. So then this will return a little blob with information about this chart. Again, if I want to extract that as JSON, I can do that very easily here. And it's colorful JSON, not just JSON. So that's nice. All right, so next I'll show you, well, I didn't go into push and pull, but we're gonna do a sync demo. But you can imagine if I was to just pull a chart, it was just put in a folder right here. And with all the attached objects, we'll go into more detail on that. So the next thing I'm gonna do is just get a dashboard. So look at my dashboard list. So this should be a much shorter list. So the one I'm interested to work on here is number 3. So here, I think I could go back to see the chart in this dashboard as a sub chart list. And I can say dashboard ID is equal to 3. So then we'll see the charts that are in that dashboard. Fancy. So if you want to see the SQL behind a chart, here's what you would do. So you just go like this, and this will show you the SQL, which is like, wait, I can't copy that. There's a bunch of color codes and things like that. So I do believe you could do Porcelain here too. So if you just like, I want to put that in file, you should get like the very clean SQL here. I preset, I think we do put some IDs to the queries before and after. So we have some custom things that allow for auditing the SQL so the database can join the sessions behind the scenes. So just a little bit of a technical detail here. So similarly to SQL, if you want to get the data that's behind a chart, you just do this. And again, super rich formatting, colorful, cute data table, shows the SQL too, but your agent's probably going to choke a little bit on this. So if you want, you can just go Porcelain on this, and that should just be a very clean CSV.
Hitting the help command anywhere as you go through this. Max just showed a bunch of the features of listing things and getting around to the various assets. So you can, as he showed, browse around in your CLI, and we've got all these fun different formats. But it is very human friendly, very agent friendly, and very automation friendly, I think is the key point we're trying to make here. It works pretty much flawlessly with preset. That is kind of our default use case. But as mentioned, it should work with superset as long as you can figure out all of the auth business. That's the part we haven't really dialed in much, but definitely have plans to because we know the world needs that. So the use cases we wanted to cover are the automation and CI/CD kind of workflows. So one key one, for example, well, actually, there's several use cases for workspaces that Preset offers, which are instances of Superset. So if you want to migrate BI assets from dev to staging to prod, or from one AWS region to another, or you want to have kind of a templated example that you push out to different customers, clients, departments, any use case for multiple workspaces, this is a great tool to push those assets around and keep everything up to date. The agentic coding integration, I guess, yeah, let's talk about this. I don't know if you want to jump right in, Max. I'll switch back to you.
All right. So a thing I did behind the scene while you were here is I tried to run some SQL, and it says you haven't picked up a database. So I listed my database connections. Here I have just 2. And then the command that I run was sup database use 2. So when I do that, again, right, it's a stateful CLI. So if I go show my configuration, then you'll see that my database ID is set to 2. My workspace is set to whatever workspace I pick earlier. So now I can run sup SQL select 1. Just showing that this works. Again, right? You want to extract some data, some CSV, dash CSV, this stuff. Then you get a clean CSV. This one might be colorful. It's got a header. So if you wanted to dump that into a file, again, you would probably Porcelain this. So now I should just get a 1. There's no header here, I think, because there's no title. Oh yeah, there's a bit of a header. So there's probably an option to show or not show the headers. So I'm going to kill this session, and we'll get back to it just in a little bit. So here I have some examples inside Agor. So what is Agor? It allows you to create sessions with Claude Code, Codex, Gemini, and OpenCode. Kind of, not quite, but these 3 work very well. So if you work inside your CLI, inside the Claude Code CLI, the Codex CLI, the Gemini CLI, those are extremely powerful. Here we use the SDKs that are provided by Google, Anthropic, OpenAI to build a nice fancy UI on top of it where you can have multiple sessions. So here, I could have done this in the Claude Code CLI, but I did it inside of Agor. So here, the first thing that I did in this session, and if people have requests, I can run whatever to show this is live. I just didn't want you to have to look at me type directly into an AI session and wait for the AI to use a bunch of tools as demonstrated here. So it would have taken some time. So first thing I told my agent is like, you have access to SUP. It's an awesome CLI. Run SUP chart help to discover what it can do, right? So the first thing I said is like telling my agent that I have this CLI. Now this CLI is very new, so that means your agents are not yet trained on the existence. They don't know about SUP, so they need to figure it out the same way that you are figuring out about SUP today. So the first thing I ask is like, sweet, let's find the video games sales dashboard and list the charts while filtering on dashboard ID, right? So you see the agent is running some tools. So here we can introspect what it did, but it ran a dashboard list. It searched for a video game. It found something. Then it found that the dashboard ID was 3, and it ran another command. It ran the exact right command it needed to run to see this, right? And then it answered to me like, here's a list of charts that's inside your dashboard that you're interested in. And I said, can you explain chart 77? I could have referenced it by name, but I had the number here. I believe like 77 is here. So that's the top 10 games by market sales. So then you see the agent using six tools in a row. And I'm going to spare you of the details, but it ran some SQL. Let's see, actually, if we go a little bit deeper, it did some interesting analysis, right? It did some group by different things. It did some counts, just looking at a number of rows. Did some thinking, quite a bit of thinking, and that was pretty quick. Actually, you can see here. Let me collapse this. So if I collapse this, you can see it took a minute 22, a minute 22. And then it told me about all these charts. It ran the SQL behind each of the charts, I believe, or did its own analysis. And it told me about the best-selling game of all time, the most successful platforms, right? So you really have the analyst in a box here. The magic happens when you take something like Claude Code or Codex and you give it access to SQL. Right? The beauty here too with SUP SQL is going through REST, and it has the exact same access to that database as the user who's logged in into preset, right? So it's not necessarily the same as using a service account in the database. Like here, you're still on top of Superset. Authentication, authorization is the same. You only have access to the databases you have access to. And then the logging behind the scene, like Superset will log that this user ran this query. So that's pretty neat. So that was the first example. Any comments, reaction, Evan, on your side before I jump into the next session?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. One of them is the SQL running against the superset preset data set or directly against the underlying table or view? Does it know all about the semantics, the stuff that will ultimately be exposed through MCP?
Yes. So the answer is yes and yes. So when it runs SubSQL, it uses the SQL JSON endpoint. I forgot the name of the exact endpoint, but it's the same endpoint that SQL Lab uses. So it's very much like a SQL endpoint. And that's essentially it. Now, at the same time, through the sub various commands, it can go and look at a chart, look at the SQL that's behind it, figure out which data set it is, get the location of the data set, get the database ID. So it can find its way, right? So it can, through logic, join, your superset assets with what's inside your database.
Okay.
Another thing too, if you had some data sets that are not available as a superset map data set, I've seen the agents run information schema.table, which is like it knows how to list the table in a schema. So it's not limited to the data sets that are catalog inside superset too, right? You could just use this thing as a data access layer, put your agent on top of it, and sub-SQL away against like a brand new database. All you need is a database connection. For the metadata, agents more and more are just able to figure out like list all the charts and list all the tables or all the views inside this schema that I'm working with, list the schemas, check out the columns in here. Let's get a let's get a select this thing to see the values that exist in this column, right? So the agents are getting really good, as I will show in just a second. Another use case that I did, again, I told it like you have access to, I had to kind of tell it you have access to SUP, and here's how you use it in this environment. Um, oh yeah, this one I ended up like creating the mermaid diagram we just looked at. But I think actually in this one here, I said, once you get familiar with things, can you give yourself a tour of what's in this workspace and summarize everything that's in this workspace? So you see, the agent is doing a lot of work. It's looking at a bunch of different things. It listed the charts. It tried to figure out what SUP is all about, and then what's available in this workspace. It's you have 2 database connections, you have 20 data sets, you have 20 charts, here's 7 dashboards that are in here, right? So like you can see now that you give the agent tools and the agents can do wonders. And that's kind of what's happening
Got a
here.
couple questions along those lines. One is asking about metrics that are defined in the data set. Will it have access to that? And how do queries work with semantic layers? That's critical for their understanding of the data.
Yeah, let's look at it. So I'm not sure. So here I had to reactivate my CLI, but if I say sub data set list, that's one we haven't run yet. These are the data sets in here. So if we're interested in the one I've been working with was the video game sales, right? So I can say show to, and here, oh, sorry, the command is info. Here, I'm not sure if we currently list the metrics in the data set. So here it shows the columns. Unfortunately, it doesn't show the metrics, but it's super easy for us to add a little metric blob with the SQL that's behind it. So that means the agent, you can tell it, look at this data set and how it's configured. I want to reuse the same metrics as the ones that are defined. Now go run some new SQL against it. We don't really have, so there's a chart data endpoint in Superset that's used to as a bit of a semantic layer behind us. We're working on semantic layer. There's probably going to be a webinar demoing some of the semantic layer. So we want to support all the semantic layers. We're working actively on Snowflake. Currently, we have some support for Snowflake. We want full support for Snowflake, full support for DBT. Cube.dev as another one we want to support, and we're interested in Databricks, Malloy. So Superset's going to be a place where you can query all your semantic layers, and SUP as it grows alongside all of this will allow you to introspect the semantic layer, maybe use it, right? So you could see your agent or SUP enabling these dimensional queries that are not SQL. They're more like payload and JSON.
Perhaps a related question, somebody's saying, if a user hasn't been given access to SQL Lab, are they able to run any arbitrary SQL using SUP?
They are not. Yeah, so they would not be able to do so. I think it's the right behavior. So if your RBAC doesn't have access to the SQL endpoint, then your connection doesn't and your CLI doesn't as a result. Now they do have in theory access to the chart data endpoint. We don't really have an interface for that, but that means that they should be able to run something like what I was running before, which was the chart data. So they should be able to run this because they have access to that endpoint, provided they have access to the underlying data set or that chart.
And then kind of access related, somebody's asking about the preset pricing plans and what the limitations on using SUP might be. Like, does this require API access as a paid feature or anything like that?
I believe so. So the API, there's what you would call like the internal like API and then more of the external API. I think if you want to use the API properly, it's a bit of an add-on. Um, so there's probably some different ways you can authenticate if you don't have the API access package with preset, but I think it's pretty reasonable in terms of pricing and definitely a powerful thing you probably want. But yeah, can certainly talk to us, talk to an expert, and they'll hook you up. We're also very friendly in terms of like, hey, we'll give you access for a month or two. You see if it's valuable for you, and then we can talk about whether you want to pay for it or not.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for users to trial this stuff. So talk to sales. I'll give you the link on the slides when we get back to those, and we'll hook you up.
All right, I'll do.
Perfect.
I want before we go into another question.
Yeah.
I did this little experiment yesterday as I was preparing for this, and I just wanted to show like how good Claude Code with SQL is, and that's true of Codex too. I do have a Codex session in here too, but I wrote this like one shot eval where I'm like, hey, I'm this example data set. Can you go in there see if we have video game sales, the superset instance, ask a bunch of questions that you can ask an analyst normally, right? Like tell me like how many rows in there data set, like how many charts and all of this. We have a world population data set in the examples. I'm like, can you tell me the growth rate of Canada between this and that? And it's absolutely insane that what these agents can do. Um, so answer to my question. So this is the agent going on for a little bit less than 5 minutes or right around 5 minutes. And it answers all my 12 questions, like, very, very easily. So it kind of shows the power of like you couple one of these agentic tools with something like SUP. And also then you've got a companion that can really help you do a lot of stuff.
All right. So we've covered the agentic coding stuff a bit, multi-workspace management. This is what Max is going to demo next. So you can actually do all sorts of assets as code for backups, for version control, for deployment to multiple instances. Use cases are up to you. And there are some use cases here we're going to give as examples. I think we might not have time to go in depth into these, but there's a lot of questions you can ask the agents or ask directly of the tool. And but when you combine the tool with an agent, then you can start really asking these sorts of questions. Explain the chart, and it does a bunch of business logic behind the scenes to get those answers like Max was showing. Uh, the key thing here is that LLMs are great at generating SQL, and this works very directly with SQL. So with their powers combined, it opens a lot of doors for automation. And then subsync is what Max is going to go into in just a second. But before I switch back to him, I wanted to field a couple of questions because they're building up. Um, One is there an option to set porcelain or any other format as a default using the config or an environment variable? If that doesn't exist now, I'm sure we can build it very quickly.
Yeah, I could probably start inside Agor. I could just start a new Git branch, Git work tree, and get it done while we were doing this. So the
Let's
pace
just
of development for this kind of stuff, like writing a cute little CLI, is so easy now. So our velocity at preset's been like,
Yeah, I think the answer there is submit these feature requests as you try this new tool. We're going to be able to crank them out pretty quick. So we'll put,
yeah, before you know it, 0.1.2 or 0.2 is going to be out. So line them up and we can put some agents on it and it will take just about no time. Currently, an option I added recently was monochrome because the color codes are just getting their burning tokens that are not useful. So you can set monochrome the same way you could say, here's my preferred output. Actually, that we might have that. I'm not sure how hooked in it is, but yeah, we can add the config flag that's like preferred output method and then that will go into the config system so you don't have to type that dash dash porcelain all the time.
yep. And then another question is, again, does it come under the enterprise plan or will there be additional charges? Right now, the API access comes, I believe, with the enterprise plan only, but you can please talk to sales and we'll figure something out. We want to get people beta testing this thing. And then does it work on self-hosted superset? Probably, yes. We've been developing focused on preset. As you can see, there's a lot of preset specific features, but if you can wire up the auth to superset, it ought to work. And that's definitely part of the roadmap to make sure it's available. And
Yeah, I'll get ahead of some questions too. So the license BSL for SUP. So that means essentially preset as the commercial rights, but it's essentially open source in all other ways. Meaning you can use it, you can contribute to it, you just can't make money off of selling it. We need to defend ourselves with whenever someone's going to open up another superset hosted service and keep some differentiators to ourselves. But in all practical purposes, you can use it open source as long as you're not trying to make money off of it. Only us has the right to do it to do that. There needs to be a mode. So we're looking to partner up with people that want to bring like first class superset support to the CLI. So there, when you look at SUP help, you see the workspace list, SUP workspace list, SUP workspace creates, so all the workspace stuff doesn't really make sense outside of the context of preset where we do, multi-workspace stuff.
Mhm. There's another question that's important. I think we're going to get to it later about the distinction between this and MCP and how this is or isn't using MCP tools. Um, but we're going to get to those distinctions soon, I think, unless you want to address those now.
No, I mean, I'll tackle them. So, the MCP and the CLI and the REST API are just different ways that we expose to interact with Superset, whether it's to get context about what's happening in there, or mutate some objects, or do various things. There are some things that are very kind of only make sense in the context of a CLI, maybe. So anything you might want to do around automation, CI/CD. So the example of the syncs, I'm going to demo in just a second. It's probably something you don't want your agent to run a sync for you, though you could through the CLI. But you think of it this way. If you want some agentic workflows, you can expose both the CLI and both the MCP. If you think about GitHub, right? GitHub's got a GH CLI, and they have the GitHub MCP. And personally, I prefer to use GH because it's fully trained on it and it doesn't burn tokens, right? So there's the consideration with MCP that loading up the Superset MCP is going to burn like 10 to 20,000 tokens, depending on how we set it up. And you might prefer one over the other. If you want to schedule something to run nightly and extract all of your key dashboard definition and charts and data sets and push that to Git, for instance, that's perfect for CI automation on a cron. And not something you do on it with an agent, though you could.
All right, we're getting a little bit pressed for time. There's more questions coming in. If we don't answer them here, please reach out. I'll show you the coordinates in a bit. But right now, Max, if you want to show a little bit of syncing, I think this is
Yeah,
pretty.
that's the most complicated part of the CLI. So bear with me as I try to explain that. So subsync. What is subsync? So I can scroll up a little bit. So multi-target asset synchronization. Um, so you're going to be able to push and pull objects that you define. And so we're going to work on creating this sync config. And the sync config is the metadata that's used for the sync. So in here, you're going to say what you want to copy from which workspace and into which workspace is. So you can target multiple workspaces. So we have a lot of people, preset customers that prepare multiple BI instances for their customers, right? So that means they have a template stored somewhere, and then they want to synchronize assets with all of their hundreds of customers overnight or at times, right? There's a new version of the template dashboard. They want to push it to all their customers. So that's a super great use case for this. There's some Jinja templating in here. So that means I'll show you how it works, but that means if you want for your dashboard, that's the template dashboard, to show my dashboard name for customer name, you can parameterize some things inside the metadata. If you want to say, I want to use a different schema or a different database connection for in the different contexts, you can parameterize that with Jinja. So maybe I'll jump into it. So sup sync. So we're in the help now, and you see the 3 commands: run, create, validate. So here we're going to create the sync. So what I want to do is, and you see I'm in an empty folder here. Actually, I do have some things. So I'm going to clear that so we are in a clean place. So I'm in an empty folder, and I want to create a new sync. So now you're going to see me go. I think I did have a sync command prepared here, so I don't have to like figure out, run a bunch of commands to figure this out. Back into this environment. So did I run create help? So create help receives a source that is a source workspace ID. It has many targets, comma delimited. Here I'm going to have a single one to keep things simple. And there's something to force to override your sync if it's been created already. And then you give it, most importantly, a sync folder. The sync folder is where all the assets and this config file is going to live. All right, so executing this. So it says, I created a sync for you in the demo sync folder. And there's a config file here that we're going to look into in just a second. And there's a place to store the asset, because what it does is pushing and pulling. Okay, so this is the config file that it came up with. And here, just for the sake of like, instead of syncing the whole thing, I'm gonna only define the dashboards. Selection is gonna be IDs, and I believe the IDs that, so I want to only push and pull a certain dashboard ID. The one that I had in my example, I can refer to later, the ID number 3. If you wanted to know your ID, you just run superset dashboard list, you filter on your stuff, you copy paste exactly what you need. You can build these files dynamically too. Evan, if you want to share, there is a page about this exact file format and what it can receive or cannot receive.
Is it
Yeah, just
on the
put it in the
docs
chat.
site? Yep, this one.
Yeah. So do you want to include the dependencies? So that means do we want to also export the related charts, data sets, database connection? Database connection, we don't touch secrets. So that means you might get a new database connection that gets cloned up, and that one is not going to have a secret. So you're going to have to go into your target and do whatever you do with secrets, but you definitely don't want these secrets to ever touch your file system. So we do that properly here. So the target default, so I don't want to go too deep into that, but for the sake of the demo, here I'll create a new thing called customer name, and I'll call it an A by default, because this is my Jinja context, the default for my Jinja context. And then for this workspace ID, I'm going to say customer name is, pick a customer name. I don't know. I'll call it, since we've been talking about Anthropic, we'll call it Anthropic. Okay. So now this workspace as the Jinja context of this customer name. Wonderful. Oops. Somehow to get my escape key. And I believe the next thing we want to do is sup sync run. But, since we're cautious, we want to do the dash help. And then we're going to do a dry run first. So you see the dry run. You could overwrite your targets in here. You can do all sorts of things. But I'm going to run a dry run first just to make sure that things look sound. The sync folder that we just created was called demo sync. So this is where my config and my assets are going to live. So I need to know this. So running a dry run, it looks like it's going to run okay. So now I'm going to remove the dry run and do an actual run. So do you want to do this? You could say force if you don't want to be prompted. So this is going to take a moment. So we did not overwrite. So here we used UUIDs internally. So we merged the assets on the other side. So here we're in a mode where it won't override the stuff. You could say, yes, I want to override. So there's a bunch of options here we're not going to get into today. So the sync is done. So something that's interesting to look at now is like what happened in that sync folder. So I'm just going to run a find command so you can see that there's a bunch of objects that got copied, right? There's all my charts, the data sets that are used by these charts. There's even a metadata YAML file, and there is also the dashboard, and there's a bundle. So there's kind of everything that you need here. What I wanted to show is if I wanted to templatize my thing, that is my config file. So what I wanted to look at is the actual dashboard. Okay, so this is the dashboard that we're trying to sync. So the dashboard title, I could say for customer name, customer name. Okay, so now all of a sudden we should, if I rerun the sync in override mode, it will redefine the target and put Anthropic here on that workspace. Not sure if we have time to actually rerun this. I wanted to show that it works. So how do I know it works? Sup workspace list, and I'm going to grep for my sup demo. I should have shown you that the thing was empty before, but I did not. So if I want the actual name, I think I'm going to have to like run the list so I can like clickable thing. Where is that workspace? Let's see this one. All right, so that's the push. That was the target. So if I click on it now and go inside of it, look at my dashboard, I've got the video game sales and everything in here should be working. There we are. And I did happen to have the same database ID on both sides. If I did not, it would fail here and say, I don't have access to this database. So you would come in here, look at your database connection, edit the connection, put the password in there, and everything should work. So that is the demo. I forgot to change the template before, but what you would have seen normally if I run like a force push, you would have seen video game sales for demo for or something.
Right. And those files that you do and templatize when it does a pull are the ones that you can use for backups, version control, templatizing for different customers, clients, whatever. Um, Pretty wide open. So what's next? The semantic layer integration at Preset, we're working with all sorts of semantic layers. We're adding more and more support for these, so that's going to be happening. What we want to get into is adding additional tools and utilities to this CLI so you can manage alerts and reports and cache warm-up and all of these fun things. So more tools on the way. If you want to take it for a spin, this is the repo. So, take a screenshot, grab the QR code or the URL. There's a few more coming up. So if you want to fork it, check it out. That's all cool. People were raising some questions about the license. You can use it, you can fork it, you can't sell it. That's the limitation.
Yeah, you can contribute to it, but you have to accept, you have to know that only preset can commercialize your contribution to it, right? So we understand that might be, a detriment to some people. People might not want to contribute because, they can't commercialize it, but we certainly just want to make it useful for people, for all users of preset and superset out there. And we just don't want other people to go and make money with the things that we build with love. Yeah.
Yep, but we'll still be contributing to Apache Superset and all sorts of other open source take it and do whatever you want with it tools. So if you want to see the startup guide, which I had shown very briefly, there's a very rich documentation site here, and the link to it is right here on this QR code. So go ahead and snag that if you want to visit the site. It's also in the chat.
The goal is for it to be self-documenting too, right? So you pip install superset sup, and then you do sup dash dash help, and you don't have to like cross-reference documentation as much as possible, right? But we still have like a great docs website.
Yeah. And for those of you that are on Preset Enterprise, you can just start going right now. For those of you that are not, you can reach out to this link, contact sales, and we'll see what we can work out for you. And for those that were asking about a free trial, just go to, if you're not already signed up, you can just sign up for an account on preset.io and get your enterprise trial going. If you are already on a trial and you need it extended or anything like that, then again, reach out to this link and we'll hook you up. So yeah, this is the blog that just got published today about it. So go and read a little more. And then yeah, the Q&A slide. So Max, if there's something you wanted to show, or we can
No, well,
questions, we have a couple more minutes.
I just proved, I'm not going to show it now, but I'll just say like the sync is a little bit complicated, so I won't go into it. You can get back on the slides with the Q&A, but I asked an agent to create a sync for me, just, hey agent, I want to create a sync of like these three dashboard. Can you help me set it up? And the agent ran the sub sync create, and it ran a dry run, and it prepared the YAML file for me. So it's kind of no limit as to what these agents can do nowadays, right? So if you have the right tool, you give them the right tool, and there they go. They do better than you would have done in a lot of cases.
Yep. Let's see if there's any other questions we haven't touched on. Will SUP have access to workspace metrics? I think the answer is effectively yes. Can we query the chart config to identify which charts have filters applied?
Oh yes.
There you go. And let's see, if it's not MCP, how does the CLI expose its tools to the LLM, or how does the LLM have context around what to do?
Well, so here in the example that I use agentic coding tools like Claude Code and Codex that have access to Bash, right? So it's different than if you go to ChatGPT Cloud, chat.openai.com, it won't have access to your machine. But if you use Claude Code, Codex, or Gemini CLI, these CLIs, they have access to running Bash through your terminal, everything that's installed on your machine. So use it with caution. You might want to use it in Docker and things like that. In our experience at Preset, these things work very well. So it will have access to like web search and all these things that, some of these things that are more just hosted in your machine and things like that. Only available with these agentic CLI.
All right. Well, thank you, Max, for the demo. If this is a new tool, this is the big unveiling. So if you test it out, let us know what issues you find or features you want. And we're very quick to add capabilities and fix bugs and whatever you might run into that you need. And reach out to us individually or find us on Slack or reach out to contact sales if you have questions or need access to anything, and we'll do our best to help you out.
Yeah, it is a 0.1.1 is the current version too. So it's very new. Will evolve very quickly too. And then the teaser. So if you're interested to learn more about Agor, so that's agent orchestration, check out agor.live. We're going to run a webinar just doing a full tour of what this is about. It's not BI related, but it's really about managing as many agents as you can in parallel. And that's how we're able to ship things like SUP and make it awesome very, very quickly.
We'll send you an email invitation, so keep an eye on your inbox, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you, Max.
Thank you.